host. Oh, there it is.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. You want your Firefly recording?
I want something recording here.
Okay.
Can we just
Yeah,
record it?
please do
That's-
actually. I
Okay,
think
that's
that would
already
be-
happening.
Okay.
The last thing is that I have locked down the ability to people to open up their own mic until you say it's okay. That way they're not going to disturb anybody. All of us can still keep our mics open. I'm going to close mine, but just to let you know, no one will be able to open up their mic until you open it up for questions.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, we can open the room. But again, I'm just trying to get you all the technical stuff done beforehand. If somebody else has some kind of recording or note taker, is that okay to let them run? Oh,
Oh,
you
can't hear
muted.
you.
I'd rather not have more than one.
Okay.
They can
then
watch the
I
recording.
will be mindful about stopping theirs.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. Are we going to basically, you're going to do a presentation? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
If there's other things about anything you wanted to share visually, like pictures, or you said this pamphlet.
Actually, I brought a couple of items that I might just hold up. And
Okay.
I know that sounds a little maybe
No.
clunky, but I think it's kind of critical that I point out some things and talk about it. And so I think I'll do it like that. A little less
So
formal.
let me talk to you really quick. If you hold something up and it disappears, hold it to your chest.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Will
how
do.
it won't disappear.
Sounds good. Sounds
Okay. Because it's basically focused on your face. So as long as
Okay.
you keep your face in the picture, then you have a chance of it not disappearing.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good.
I was wondering if Kit, I was looking for the resources you dropped to me. I'm trying to see if you have them up where you could drop them into the chat now, or do I need to find them?
I could probably find them easily enough. They are on my desktop. Let me see if I can locate them here.
I think that we could at least just start dropping people in here so that we can kind of warm them up as we prepare.
The other thing is when you drop something into the chat, I will have to copy it and drop it in several times as more people arrive, because that way, if people come in later, I'll have to repost it. Just to let you know, that's what I'll do.
Okay. I'm going to open this up.
Okay, I can let people in.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and just let them in. We can just kind of warm up and get to know each other a minute.
And the share screen is under more, correct? Am I right about that?
No.
Where's
it looks
the
like it's under share.
Oh, it's under share. There it is. Okay. All right. So I'll know to hit that when it comes to maybe sharing the screen on that, but maybe we'll wait until everyone kind of can see everyone first, I guess.
And you should have the ability to do that without a problem. Again, I've also locked that down so nobody else can.
Okay, sounds
temporarily. Good. Okay. I'm going to disable the waiting room and everyone is here for you.
Wonderful. Well, we're at about 5. Let's see. Is that to... Hey, Matt, it says you received a request to record to the cloud. Is that from my computer or is that somebody else's request in there?
The only one I see is yours.
Yeah, I'm going to do this and then go back to that. So where is, okay, it's still saying it's recording here. Yeah, I just want to have one recorder so we don't mess with things like bandwidth or anything like that. So, okay. Well, we are at 6 o'clock. I see some familiar faces. It's always so quiet whenever it's new people here when we're joining in. Say hello. My name is Rick. I'm gonna give us just a couple more minutes before we get started. I wish I was Tony Robbins and I had like music pumping and I could like point to people and be like, okay, your turn to dance for the camera, but that's not gonna happen. So we'll just kind of wait here in a minute, for just a minute or two, and then I'll introduce Kitt, or maybe 1 minute, and I'll introduce Kitt here. Okay, it's officially 6:01 or 8:01 Eastern, so I think we can officially start now. So I was just telling Kit that I'm terrible with introductions, but what I can tell you is Kitt Mallin has been an artist for over 35 years, an art center director. She's a painter and now a chaplain. And so she's here to share about arts-based spiritual care. And I will just introduce Kit.
Hello. Rick, thank you for having me. Thank you for welcoming me into your space here. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, just kind of a rough intro. Some of you, I might even recognize some of you from like Chaplaincy Innovation Lab or some of these forums. I've made some appearances here and there. And I think some people are wondering, why does this lady keep bringing this up, and why isn't she going away with all of this? And really it's so much about this has been an autobiographical kind of journey. The arts have been with me since I first began to learn about my faith as a child, but also in that walk with the arts, and even before I could be, calling myself a minister or even a believer in the things I believed in, arts was helping me integrate my beliefs. And a lot of people are looking at, when they hear about arts-based spiritual care, they're wondering how close it is to art therapy. And I can talk a little bit about that too, because I know some of the beginnings of all that. Because when I was a young artist with a studio in Northeast Minneapolis, I remember the first time I saw an art therapy a person working in a studio space at a warehouse arts building. And I was wondering at the time what that was. And that was when it was all just beginning for art therapy. And as I heard about it, I knew that it was psychology based and was using psychology. And I understood why people were linking maybe trauma and things like that with the arts, which is, again, a kind of another thing I can touch upon a little more depth here soon. But I always came at it from a spiritual standpoint. And it was kind of a challenge for me as a young artist, finding funding, finding opportunities, because a lot of the time I was trying to do work about my faith. And when you try to do work about your faith, there isn't always funding for that because of the separation of church and state. You will get funding for different topics for artists in graduate school, but if they're doing work about their faith, that needs to come actually from different funding streams. So when I was starting out, I knew I wanted to do work about my faith, and that my faith was linked how the word I'm losing that word, but they were very, very hard pressed linked in my experience. And so I couldn't really do work about psychology like an art therapist would, because they're coming from a different direction. When we talk about something like art therapy, therapists and psychologists are working with the psyche. They're working with personality development, behavioral modification, behavioral change, working with habits, habit formation. These are all things that, as a spiritual person, and if you're working in the arts, you're not really engaging these things. When you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective, you're working on meaning making. Why do I want to make this about my faith? What am I trying to integrate there? And we look at this as something that is like a new phenomenon, like art therapy was new, and now arts-based spiritual care is new. Really, when we really look at it, art combined with faith is actually one of the oldest practices human beings have done. And a lot of people don't, they don't think about it these days. It seems like it's maybe the new fad or the new thing, but really, if you've ever taken anyone here ever taken an art history class in college? Can I see a show of hands if you have? Okay. In art history, a lot of times they will go back to these beginnings of human civilization, and everyone's making art about their faith or about what they believed about our origins or what brought meaning to them. And we seem to have gotten away from that when it comes to working in healthcare. And we're trying to grasp at meaning in different ways. And it seems like arts have kind of dropped by the way, and probably because we don't have the funding capability that we would have otherwise. But I want to kind of encourage everyone that really with working with arts, art actually can get funding, art itself, but it's the spiritual piece that can't get the funding. And you might say, well, how does a chaplain in a hospital, get funding if they're praying? Well, usually a chaplain in a hospital gets paid through the general fund. Okay, that comes from private donations. Where if they're getting government grants, that same hospital, that doesn't really go to the chaplain, that'll go to other things in the hospital. So when you have arts, when you bring arts into it, you actually can get government funding for arts. It's trickier to get it for faith. So now if I go back just a little bit more and talk about, well, why are we trying to integrate art with beliefs really in a healthcare setting? Why would you want to? How I would phrase that or encompass that, a lot of times when we're trying to use art with spiritual care, and looking at this now with some history behind it, one thing that a human being engages when they go through like a big life change, like a traumatic life change, they are trying to adapt. So if you have a traumatic experience, if you have to move to a new place, if, suddenly you've got this, new information on, oh, I got to go live here now instead of where I was living, you have to adapt. Now, when we do these adaptation things, even Darwin, if, we had Darwinists in here, they would say that adaptation is part of survival. Okay. So when we have adaptation as part of our survival, we start to get creative. Okay. So that creativity starts flowing. So you often see when people are in traumatic situations, they're harnessing onto their creativity to navigate through those spaces. So when this happens, they say that, children that go through a traumatic experience oftentimes end up becoming creatives. And the reason they had to become creatives is because they've had to navigate. They've had to navigate out of adverse circumstance in order to kind of reinvent their life. And so here, this is kind of where the bridge happens of why are we engaging creativity when it comes to spirituality or to healthcare? It's because people are trying to navigate. And just as much as we're using our creativity to navigate through that space, we're also, by using creativity, we can teach people how to navigate out of that space. Now, was I being too far out there with you guys? Did I lose you on all that? I kind
Made
of
perfect sense to me.
Did it make sense to you? Okay. Sometimes when I go on this, I'm not sure if I'm going way too far out, but this is kind of where it all comes together. I shared with Rick kind of a layout, a drawing, or an online sketch, I guess, yesterday or last night. That kind of shows, it's kind of got a sunbeam and it's showing the different ways that arts can be applied throughout healthcare. And, there's probably people in this room. I'm mostly a visual artist, although I do have some exposure to music. I have a husband who's a musician. And so I've seen where music can be applied in many ways too. And I'm sure there's people here who maybe have background in spoken word, poem, um, dance, theater, role play, who could probably add way more to the list that I made as a shareable item here last night. But you'll see a lot of what I've got here is visual arts based, because that's been, my primary sphere. But the application of this certainly could expand, and it can be used in a lot of different settings with a lot of different kinds of patients. And it also, for those working within like the church or within your faith system, whatever that might be, it also could be something that it can be used within a faith group as well. A lot of it could be used for discipleship or within a synagogue or something of that nature to help bridge gaps in communication or help people, realize a spiritual point in a way that maybe a written word wouldn't do it by itself. So
Kit, just FYI, I did drop that resource in the chat, and whenever we post this tomorrow, I'll make sure that we upload that resource with the video replay.
wonderful, wonderful. So I thought, at this point, I can open up with some questions here, but then, maybe we can look at what I shared in this. I can share my screen on this piece that I gave to Rick yesterday, and we can kind of look at some of these different spheres, because yes, it can be used just at bedside. How many people here are hospital chaplains? Is there a hospital? Is there people here in corrections? Anyone here in corrections? I'm just curious, the sphere of ministers we have, at what field they're in of chaplaincy, if it's
I'm seeing some hospitals in the chat, and I see some people I know that are military chaplains as well. Okay, we see Animal VA Hospital. I see several hospice chaplains in here as well,
in hospice. Okay.
Spiritual
So-
direction,
and parish ministry.
spiritual direction and group
Oh,
direction.
spiritual direction, yeah,
and-
Okay, yes, certainly could be used there too.
and educator for me.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So when we look at the little sun chart, and I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. See how we can do.
Lot of people.
Is everyone seeing that? Yes?
Let's go.
Yes, yes, we
Good.
can see.
Good. Okay. I was a little, I've been a little clunky with my Zoom, and so hopefully I'm not stumbling through it too much for you guys. But as you can see here, we got like our little sunbeam. I meant for it to be kind of, inspiring, kind of spreading the light here. But you can see that there's a lot of different spheres that it could be shared in. And I was thinking on maybe eventually doing like a little maybe leaflet to kind of go with each of these over time, to maybe be a little more detailed on what some of these things are. But I thought I might go over some of it tonight, just to kind of give you a rough idea of what I'm talking about. Because sometimes you write stuff down in phrases and people don't really know what exactly you're saying. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just kind of pick through it and talk about a few things. And I also brought a couple things to show you too that might help you see how this could be helpful. But I thought, before I go in and start, me talking about some of this, is there any questions from what I've covered so far, or anything for Rick or anything like that?
Nothing for me, just for you.
Anybody? Okay, well, I'll jump into it then. Let's start all the way on the left. We'll kind of go around the sun and we'll look at the bedside creative. I've spent a lot of time in a hospital, so I might be a little myopic in this way by talking a lot about hospital circumstance. If you have something to maybe add or interject that you might see from another space, let me know. I'm kind of curious to learn more. But we would notice in a hospital setting that sometimes patients in there are looking for, especially if they've been in there for a long time and they're sitting up and they're kind of mobile, but they still can't really be discharged. They're needing something to do, and they do have their phones, and phones can provide a lot, provided that they have their glasses and can see and things like that. They can play games and do different kinds of puzzles and things on the phone, but something about being able to get your hands on something and do something other than screens, because patients get a lot of TV and they got their phones. And so it's a way of kind of introducing another thing that they can do in that space while they wait through what sometimes is weeks or even months in a hospital space. So it's like, what can you do creative that's in a bed, and how can that make me feel better? So different things, mini Etch-a-Sketch. I remember giving one to my brother as a cancer patient when he was young, and that was one of those things where it was a kind of a time passer. You can also get small mini puzzles that actually come in matchboxes for those that might enjoy doing things like that. But it's a good way to kind of pass the time and get like maybe a little creativity flowing in the mind. There's another thing we got, and I brought the sample of that. It's something you see there called watercolor magic pad. These are pads, and I'm just going to hold this up. I might have to, I kind of have a little bit of blur here, but you said to hold it up. But these are, whoops.
He said to your chest, he said.
To my chest. Okay. So hang on, let me, I think I lost my view here.
Oh.
I'll just
Sorry,
keep
I brought that
talking
down so you could be seen.
Okay, all right.
I
Okay.
can bring it back up when you're done.
Okay, so these are pads that they kind of have like a glossy etched in image, but they have just on the paper itself, you can see the colors here. And those colors are just little swatches of watercolor. It isn't a full cup. It isn't something that's going to make a mess in a bed. It's something that you can just get a little bit of water in a cup and give them that brush, and they can make the color do whatever they want it to do. And so they have a lot of autonomy and freedom in there to work at their space if they want to, as
What's-
something to feel like they're doing a little something more with their time than just watching TV.
What was that called?
Go ahead.
What was that called?
That's called a watercolor magic, and they're very affordable. You can get these, let me see. Oh, there we go. You can get these at Five Below. So they're less than $5 for a full pad of them, and they're perforated so you can pull them out. And they have them in different packs, different variety packs. And so they're very handy and you don't have to worry about mess. It's really not a messy thing. Another thing they have at Five Below that I'll share is they're like mini tins, okay? And in these tins, they've got just like a little thing you can paint. They've got a little fish here, okay? And they have those, cheapy, and it's very, very affordable, very inexpensive, but it's something that a person can do at their little table at bedside without making a big fuss or big mess or deal. Another thing, I'm gonna look at my chart as I'm saying this here. Give me just a second. Another thing that could be used is, and for those of us who are musical, is a kalimba. And I want to show you, I don't know how many of you have been in a hospital ward and you're walking down and you're hearing people sometimes screaming or crying in pain. That is a common experience for many of us working in hospitals. And for the other patients that are in that setting, it's like they go from points where they're listening to someone moaning in pain to listening to nurses talk and chat to listening to bleeps and buzzes and then listening to an emergency go off because someone's heart has stopped or there's a rapid response. And then it goes back to maybe someone moaning and crying. And all of that can be a little heavy spiritually for those who are, in your ears. You can't really stop your ears. They're not going around handing out earplugs to everybody. But there can be things that kind of break that up. And so I wanted to kind of share the kalimba with you. And hang on, it's telling me something here. Okay. Kalimba, and I'm going to hold this up. It's there we go. They come in different varieties. And the reason I show you the kalimba is if you are a terrible musician, this still sounds pretty. Okay. And so I'm just going to play a few. I'm not a musician at all. Okay. Can you guys hear this? They're keyed in different settings. You can get them keyed in a C and keyed in a G. I like the G, it's a lower sound, but even the higher sounding one is nice. But it's one of those things that it can kind of break that up, this going from pain and crying to silence to emergency. To hear that kind of thing, even from people that don't know how to play that well, is something that can change the atmosphere of the whole space. And so I bring that up, and there are a couple of other instruments that can do that. Some of them are too loud and there's some drums you can do that maybe resonate too much. They might be better in other settings, like maybe in like a rehab facility or something like that. But something gentle and soft that maybe other patients could be doing when they're feeling better is a way to kind of encourage the space for everyone that's in it. When it comes to other ways to kind of do bedside things, just coloring things that have encouraging statements. You can get like coloring pads that have, it could be scripture verse, it could be Bible promises, it could be positive affirmations, it could be statements from other faith systems, but something that's just kind of getting them mindful of hopeful things while they're, doing this creative activity. And the creative activity is actually doing some dopamine enhancement and things like that in the brain. It's helping them to kind of feel better about where they're at and what they're doing. And you can also find journals that are about encouragement, particularly for behavioral health patients. You can find these journals, and some of them are very creative. They let you kind of draw on them or things like that. Those can be assets too at bedside. And if we move up on our sunbeam to dexterity, speech, and environmental adaptive, what we're talking about there is a few different things. If you've been on a rehab floor and if you've worked with stroke patients, some of them are very discouraged about their mobility, their ability to speak. Sometimes some of them can't speak at all. And so a way to encourage them is to help them sometimes to not feel totally powerless on waiting for, what the nurse is going to do next. You can bring them stuff that helps them, work with their hands a little bit. If they've lost feeling in their fingers, movement in their hands, and they want to be able to work on that without disrupting whatever they're doing with the nurses on their rehab regimen, you can introduce things like needle arts or mandala coloring. For people that are maybe struggling or want to practice writing, or they can't speak at all and but they can write. What's good is something called a boogie board, and I've got a boogie board right here. And I don't know if you guys have worked with these at all. They're trying to write on them. You probably won't see it through the screen, but you can write on these with these styluses. And you can see, it's probably hard to see it here, but I can see like green writing on this. And that is a way for a patient to communicate something if they can't talk at all. And so those boogie boards, or even just like you can get small chalkboards with like a chalk attached to it. And you can get those magnetic boards where it's like a magnetic writer, similar principle. But all of those can help people either, work on, drawing something. And it just it's no mess. You just kind of click it and it all goes away, or shake it or whatever, and it all goes away. And they still can communicate maybe what they weren't able to communicate because their voice isn't working, or they got something, some kind of tube hooked up or something like that, but they're still sitting up, they're still cognitive, but they're not able to express what they're needing to express. Another way that's helpful. Go ahead.
Hey, Kit, you're wanting us to be open to questions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, just stop me and interrupt me because I'll just, keep going.
Great.
Go ahead.
So both by temperament and how I've leaned into my strengths, I'm better at responding than I am at planning. I'm better at using myself, my body, my inflection, my body movements than I am at using items. I would say that I am a low skill artist versus a high skill artist. And I kind of wonder about interventions that are maybe prone to somebody that notices something, doesn't have resource, or didn't plan a resource, and maybe isn't artistic, like what some of those might be, versus like somebody on the other side that's like, I'm very artistic, I'm highly skilled. I'm a planner. I came with all these resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are some resources. It depends on to what extent. I mean, a lot of people have a phone. It's amazing what can be done even with just a phone. Like let's say, I only have my phone and I want to do something creative. There's things like you can get apps that do sketch work for you. You just have to be the photographer. And so you can take a photo of something and then you do different filters that can do like a vector, or it can do like a sketch, make it a black and white sketch. And you can make little enhancements to it. That's something, if a person has a phone, they can certainly do that. In terms of, um, lower skills, or I don't have drawing skills. One thing that you could introduce, let's say someone wanted to do a journal page, but they don't know how to draw and they want to put, let's say, a dragonfly on there. You can just, have them take their phone, or have them, just do a Google image search and find a dragonfly and print it off on a computer. You can sometimes just do that by having it on, the same Wi-Fi network, and you can just send that right to the printer. Will spit it out. Okay. And you got that thing, and you've got their journal sitting there. You can just take a piece of chalk on the back, rub it on the back, just so it's a different color than the actual journal page. Rub that chalk on the back, place it down, have them use a ballpoint pen. It will transfer that image right to the journal page with no skill involved. It's just a matter of, pressure. It's the same thing as a piece of carbon paper, but you don't have to actually even buy the carbon paper. You just need a piece of chalk, and that will transfer the image, and then they can draw into that. You can give them some markers to marker into that. Again, you don't have to have much of a skill level, and there's a lot of tricks that artists use that actually save time in the trade, because you're trying to save, labor hours. So you find different transferring techniques and things like that. And so there's a lot of those kinds of things you can use with people that, and the idea isn't to have skills, art skills. The idea is to convey meaning. What is the meaning of, what I'm talking about here? Or what am I trying to do? Am I trying to share something with my daughter? Am I wanting to, maybe do, I want to write her a letter and I want to put some meaningful images in it, or things like that. It depends on where they're trying to go with it, but there certainly are a lot of ways you can introduce this stuff without having an arts background. You just need to have a couple of tools on how do I get this image onto here without, a whole lot of financial investment and a whole lot of, expertise, fine expertise on it. Does that help? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think I think you answered that question, and I see some more. So I have follow-up, but I'll let other people jump in, like Chaya.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Kaya. I had been a chaplain for 10 years. I'm a spiritual director now, but what I'm thinking about in terms of Rick's question is something simpler than even having to do any of that. Is more like, what's the color you're feeling today?
Yes. Yes. And that is perfect. Yeah.
Bringing markers, maybe just talking about it. What
Mhm.
why did you pick that color? Let's talk about.
Yeah.
Or what's the word that, if you had to pick 5 words today that demonstrates your feelings of, like, what's on your mind, what you're thinking about, what are the 5 words? Let's
Mhm.
make a poem together, or let's bring those words together into something, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about.
I can help you with that right now, actually.
That I would.
One of the best tools you can get if you want to do color field with someone, if you want them to just express what they're feeling in color, tempera sticks. Okay, tempera sticks are the best. It's what's beautiful about tempera sticks is it looks like very expressive painting, because it's like you're drawing with lipstick. Okay, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're drawing with lipstick, but it dries. It's not like an oil pastel where it leaves a residue, and it doesn't leave a residue like a crayon would. Even it dries like paint, And so it has and then you can write on the top of it with a ballpoint pen or with a Sharpie marker or things like that. So you can get this expressive down, no mess, at bedside. No, you don't got to get out brushes or water or anything like that. And it'll look like a painting, but it is a temper stick. That's a kind of a good way to do it. And it's really no expertise. Let them express that with color. And then, you might want to let it sit there and, dry a little bit. Because it's really not like fully wet paint. It almost feels like kind of a wet crayon, but it dries without feeling waxy. And then on top of that, and it's very expressive, there's very raw marks with that. And then if they want to add anything more to that, or if they just want to leave it, you can let them leave that. And it's really as simple and raw color emotion as you want to get. If you're into color field painting or Mark Rothko style stuff, that'll get you there quickly at bedside without having to put a whole lot into it, really. Does that help?
What I also heard though is that you were connecting it to the spiritual care part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Haya, did that answer what you were getting at, or because you were still kind of talking? I think you guys were over each other for a minute.
Okay.
I was thinking if you don't have any materials with you, if you're a
Okay.
person that is like averse to carrying materials or being prepared. I mean, these are great ideas if people want to get prepared. But I was responding to Rick sort of saying like that may not be me. I may just show up. How can I do this? And so I was just saying there's ways to do it without really any materials. Is
Oh, okay.
is to still get into the creativity. I mean, you always can bring a paper and pen if you want to help with writing. But there's so much you can do with writing and so much you can do with just your imagination and together creating something in your imagination of a story
Yes.
that has the color in it, or a story of their life, or something that's their favorite food that has a color. That's all I was saying.
Okay. Yeah, you could do that, even if you, let's say you don't have any materials at all, you could go in and use even the life of a visual artist to talk, like Mark Rothko, he eventually committed suicide. I mean, I hate to say it as a bummer note, but this was a person who was struggling and how he was trying to process was with color. And so it's sometimes calling upon how have other people kind of used art to process their experience, and if so, what color are you feeling today? Because he was working through something, and this is, these are the colors that he was working with. So you don't necessarily have to have the pad or even the materials with you, but you could use that reflection of, what color are you? And that is something, art therapists use quite a bit. They tend to do some diagnostics through that. We wouldn't be doing diagnostics or trying to do behavioral alteration with it, but we would be trying to find the meaning and let the person name the meaning themselves with it. Does that help? Did I kind of help
Yeah, and part of what my question was in that was maybe putting out a spectrum of of skills, and which way might fall on this end, which are the low skill, easy, no tools, use of self, versus maybe the higher skills where mediums, cost, skill level,
Mhm.
effort level, planning level. Um, yeah, and so I think both of your conversations are kind of hitting on what I was
Okay.
getting at. I
Okay.
I also saw, and I was scolded here in the side chat for picking the raised hand out of order because I don't know how to use electronics. But apparently, Cheryl, are you still in here? And did you still have a question?
Yeah, I'm here. Um, my question was, is this work to be done individually in a set time? Because most of my work is in a psych hospital, and you can't just, there's no one that's going to let them run loose with pens and paper and all kinds of stuff. So are there things you can do by by yourself that aren't dangerous to other
Yeah.
people or yourself.
Yeah, there is. Even as we were just talking about color field painting, even finger painting, really. I mean, that's about as harmless as it gets. But I mean, really, finger painting, you could do color field painting without having to use any tools. And sometimes that's the better way to express with it, is just kind of letting them work through it. And sometimes it's that tactile thing. Um, Actually, when we go down, if we go all the way to the far side of the sun here on this image, if we look at calming and stimming and distraction, we look under that heading, we see a few things there that are what we call, stuff that's designed to help people with maybe autism spectrum or difficulty calming themselves. We have neurographic art, which is kind of a mindfulness art. Picture it as drawing lines, and what you're doing is kind of smoothing the intersection between lines that intersect each other. And it is kind of it's art that doesn't have an agenda. You're not trying to do this, drawn image or a finished piece. What you're trying to do is relax with how things come together. And so you're just seeing where lines intersect, and you're kind of smoothing the lines. We're at that intersection point and moving along. So it's more about art that releases anxiety instead of introduces it. Because sometimes when we get in our, I got to draw this and it's got to look this way, and it doesn't have to be that. In fact, sometimes it works better when it is the opposite of that. And so what you're doing is just enjoying working with the lines and how the lines are moving. And then there's also silly putty and finger knitting and fidget toys. And you might be thinking, okay, why? And I'll show you another thing here too. If we can get me to, let's get this out of the way. This right here, I'm going to hold it close to me. This is a What's It fidget toy. And it's one of those, like Silly Putty, it's kind of got this pulling thing. It's held together by like a hairband kind of thing. And you can make all kinds of things with this. It's amazing how many different shapes and even would-be animals you can make out of this. Great thing to work with kids. It is a tool that's actually used for autism spectrum. And autism kids seem to really be drawn to it. And part of it is that pulling thing, just like you would Silly Putty. It actually helps with the stimming and the nervous interaction that happens that causes the repetitive stimming. And so the pulling engagement is actually what helps release some of that anxious pressure. And so that's another way that creative process, the pulling, the bipedal use of hands can help with that as well. Question? Did someone have a question there?
I just got to ask again. In the hospital I worked in, it seemed like the thing we did was color. And I mean, that was it. Oh, we're going to have a group and we're going to color this today. So it's kind of like there's got to be other stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping to see that because it's hard to introduce things because they can hurt anybody. They can eat chalk. So I'm kind of listening for that.
It depends on the level, I guess, the level of mental illness you might be working with. When I was working in behavioral health, our folks were allowed to have pens and paper and to journal, but I realize not every hospital situation is like that, depending on the level of care required. There are some things that, I mean, it'd be worth talking to their psychotherapist about to see, can they work with clay? Clay is a great thing in terms of if they're working with anger, anxiety, aggression, things like that. And again, we're not there to treat, but there are some art forms that are conducive to working with people who are struggling in various ways. And just maybe by talking to their therapist and saying, hey, do you think it'll be okay if I work with clay with them? Might that be a way to help them not only with what you're doing, but also spiritually to kind of help process meaning in what they're experiencing. But clay, I think it would be a great, any hand-built clay would be a great thing to work with in behavioral health. That's why, I say silly putty, obviously you don't want, working with some people, if they were to chew on it, or, you don't want people chewing and choking if you think they're at the point where they couldn't, handle themselves that way. But if they can, and if their therapist lets them, I certainly would say, yeah, the hand built, it would be a definite way to go with behavioral health people.
Yeah, I think just even about when I was a kid or I was a parent and I went to my 4-year-old and I was like, oh, wow, look at the clouds. What do you see? Oh, I see a lion and I see, this and that. Or, you know, drawing a painting with our own hands. Like, oh, what are you drawing? And those sort of things are like imaginative arts.
Yes.
And they're all safe for, well, I guess
Yeah.
they could also become unsafe in,
Well,
an adult health facility, but
yeah,
granted.
it's a way for them to name meaning in what's going through their head. And where a therapist might try to, an art therapist is going to try to look for meaning in what they've done. They're going to try to say, they will diagnose and they will say, well, this is symbolic of this. We don't, as spiritual care, we don't do that. We don't try to look for the meaning. We let them name the meaning and let them, help us, help share with us what their experience is.
I see Amelia has a question. And then we have a couple in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of my work is done with people with, moderate to advanced dementia. So sometimes it's even, very advanced to where you're not even sure. I mean, you can give them a piece of coloring paper or something simple, but do they even know what to do with that? And the thing for me is it meaningful? So for people with severe cognitive impairment, have you found anything that really is meaningful for them and not just entertainment or passing time, but that does
Tactile.
for
Yep.
them?
Yep. Tactile, stuff that they can feel in their hands and that's experiential. Now, sometimes people with dementia, sometimes they have great long-term memory, but very poor short-term memory. So it's important to kind of look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I would say, if they're having, if their long-term memory is in check, and if they're able to pull back some of that long-term stuff, there is stuff to work with there in terms of kind of memory booking and things. There's things you can do. But if they really are just, kind of floating out there and you're not sure they're remembering much of anything, I would say go after tactile. And this is kind of, if we go back to what maybe was experienced with Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller, what she was able to grasp was the tactile. And so you're going after, it could be cold, wet clay, it could be fiber arts, it could be felting, things like that. And that's experience unto itself. You're not making this, tangible object per se, but you are giving them experience that maybe helps to kind of bring relief to the constant, being in almost no man's land in a sense. And I think that's, if we use that Helen Keller comparison, it's like here was something that she could hang on to because everything else was kind of a vacuum. And so it's giving them that kind of thing. Two, sometimes music can reach people in ways that, the standard verbal does not. They're not hanging on to linguistics, but maybe sometimes, keying in with a song that they might remember. Like even Jesus Loves Me, things like that. Some of these childhood memory things can sometimes cue in and bring comfort in a way that the traditional memory check isn't really going through. Does that help?
Yeah. I Amelia, I also will add to this that, I worked in dementia. I ran a music and memory program. You should check out the Alive Inside documentary on the music note there. I put a resource in the chat. Jolene Bracky's, I think it's Creating Moments of Joy is something that I used a lot in my hospice career. I was trained in Montessori in validation method as well, and those sort of things have lots of wonderful tools you can use. and I will go back to Kit's question. Does that answer your question? And then come to another question here.
And Rick, I like that you brought up Montessori because actually too, if you were to introduce a lot of this stuff in a setting where it could be housed, Montessori is the way to go because it really does help people kind of engage things at levels that they're ready to engage it at. I'm
Yeah,
ready for the next.
I
Go
believe
ahead.
Cameron Camp has a whole course on Montessori and dementia. Amelia, did you have a follow-up or are you good?
Yeah, so what I heard was tactile. I mean, music, I'm all over it. I've known about that for a long time, but I've kind of struggled with anything but music, particularly for people that are nonverbal, that really just don't appear to be there cognitively.
Yep.
But here and to that, soft things, hard things, felt. I can definitely try that.
Even cold, wet clay can be really a wonderful sensory experience.
In the comments, you have somebody say that they love the chalk method for creating images and what it means to patients. Some people say they've used paper dolls. And then the question, do you ever use prompts to explore specific issues that a patient may be grappling with?
Certainly can be. With prompts, I try to be careful that I'm not introducing something that would be introduced through art therapy. Art therapy has a lot of prompts. I tend to come at it to try to avoid touching upon art therapy prompts and keeping it more to spiritual care. I sometimes come at it as, what spiritual practice or spiritual discipline, as it were, am I trying to share with this person? And I might kind of go down and say, okay, this person's maybe having trouble working in group settings or appreciating the comments of other people. Okay, let's say that that's it. Then I would probably introduce something that, like an activity that engages like maybe a group of 3 and get, you can do something. If you look under peer support, you see something called the Zentangle timed group share. That's basically everyone sharing an art project. Someone starts off drawing it and then you time it and you pass it to the next person. Next person adds a little something to it. And then when the timer goes off again, you pass it to the next person. By the time it comes back around to you, you have a little art piece that you did not it didn't go with what you intended to go with. You have to work with other people's contributions. So in doing that, there's, of course, a spiritual lesson unfolding. So yeah, you can call it a prompt, if you will. I try to look at it, okay, yes, I might even start, sharing prompts, but they come at it more from, okay, what am I trying to cultivate with, what kind of spiritual lesson, if you will, or a piece of encouragement, spiritual encouragement I'm trying to introduce, and then kind of create a lesson that I think would get there with that. But I do intend to actually start doing that through an upcoming resource that I'm creating. But yeah, we can certainly design different projects that could be, kind of similar to what, were the old art therapy prompts. Does that answer your question?
Someone also asked, do you have a recommendation for cold, wet clay that is hospital friendly?
Cold, wet clay. Actually, what you might use, Durham's I think it's called wood putty. Durham's wood putty. And what it is, it's you get it at like Lowe's or Home Depot. And it's actually you add water to it and it just air dries. And it's fire resistant. If you were to make like a candle holder out of it or something like that, it's actually pretty good stuff. But you can form a lot of things out of that and have it dry and be very solid. That might be a nice thing to try. I try to stay away from paper maches and things like that because people, they'll put them too close to a candle or something like that. I prefer stuff that's almost got kind of like ceramics would. It's kind of got some fire resistant qualities, but yet you don't need a kiln for it. Another thing you can do is cast concrete. which is something I highly recommend. I use it quite a bit. It's very sturdy and it can set up in like 2 hours time. But that's if you're doing more of a casting technique rather than a forming thing. Anybody else, or did
What
I?
is the difference between a cast and a form?
When you're forming out of wet clay, it's kind of like hand building. You're kind of mushing the clay and forming it with your hands. Where a cast, you like get a purchase a mold or you make a mold. And there's different ways you can make a mold. You can take a piece of clay and press some firm flowers or succulents into it and pull that off, and then pour like plaster of Paris or cement, a fast set cement into it, give it a couple hours, and then get that clay off, and then you have a cast. You have a cast of what you were hoping to form or take an impression of. And some people, we used to do sand casting when I was in college, and we'd have just wet sand, and someone would bury their fist into the wet sand and pull it out, and then we would pour plaster of Paris into it. And you could do the same thing with like a fast set concrete. Wait a couple hours, pull it out, and you have a perfect impression of that hand. So there's ways you can do that, but it's all in, what you're trying to get with your patient. And if you're trying to work through emotion and things like that, I find that the wet clay and the pulling and things like that kind of works some of that anxious and nervous system stuff out. Casting's more about if you're trying to give a dopamine rush or dopamine payoff to someone, maybe more suited for something like recovery, a substance abuse recovery, because then they're getting, they pull that stuff out of the cast and it looks so cool. And they're like, wow, look at that total dopamine payoff. And it's a good way to kind of interrupt some of this addiction to chemical substance when you find that, that creativity you're doing has addictive things about it itself. Any other questions there? Now I can go into a little bit on, I guess maybe want to talk a little bit about the grief support activities. Does anyone here work with grief support at all? I know we had some hospice. Yeah. Okay. Well, now when we look at end of life things, there's the end of life and life change, and then there's grieving life that we're going to lose, or grieving family is grieving the fact that they're going to lose a loved one. And there is some helpful things that you can do with the arts that kind of really bring meaning making to all of that. I've found that, if we look at kind of the life change thing, now there's some stuff that I would say would be specific to, trauma or significant injury, or if you've been assaulted, things like that. That's where kintsugi, if you look at kintsugi or golden repair, for those of you who do not know what that is a Japanese or Zen wabi-sabi practice of taking something that was broken and gluing it back together with gold. And what that does is it accents the brokenness, it accents the fractures as a thing of beauty, rather than just having the vessel be the perfect thing. Sometimes it's that brokenness or that journey, or this notion that out of a broken vessel, light is what shines. That's light that can be seen. And so when we're talking about, maybe traumatic events and your life having to be rebuilt from something like that, or you're having to be rebuilt, kintsugi is a good practice for that. When we're talking about things like maybe doing memory quilting, creative book archiving, this is talking about maybe a life that's been lived, or memories that you want to share, pass down to family members. You can do, some people do a celebration of life. Sometimes they do that even before they die. And in doing so, you can do shadow box, those at funerals when they have, they share the photographs and things like that on these boards. Well, those boards, you can add all kinds of collage pieces too. I mean, for my dad's, we had his antique fishing lures and everything. And you can put that into a shadow box as a keepsake. Some people do living wakes. And so you can sometimes have these things, built and assembled, or help people create this kind of these memory things to share and work through grief. And it's kind of commemorating the little things about a person's life that you wish to cherish and hang on to, and maybe share with younger folks in your family and things like that. So the arts are really helpful for any of that tribute making or memory making, things like of that nature. Looking back at life change, some of you might wonder what some of this stuff is, and I'll just describe it. Dishu calligraphy is, I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's calligraphy that is done. It's a board that kind of changes color with water. So you're drawing with water on like a bamboo brush. And so you get this like painting that it looks like it's black, and as it evaporates, it disappears. And it's an exercise in non-permanence, that things, that we hang on to some things in a temporary way. And that can be a relief as much as it can be something that makes us sad. Because, if we've been through trauma, let's say we've been assaulted or things like that, this idea that, things can fade, or some, harsh memories can fade, can actually be a hopeful thing. Sometimes when things kind of evaporate, it can be a positive and not necessarily a negative, because we always associate with that loss, but there's some things that we want to lose, some things, some memories we want to lose in life. So some of those art practices can be helpful in that regard. Does anyone have any questions about some of the descriptions on any of these? I know that when you talk about dissolution sand, or do people know what a Zen garden is? Is anyone familiar with what a Zen garden is? Yeah. Yeah. So Zen garden is, you can make a mandala just by pushing sand around on a tabletop. And the exercise that the Buddhists use is, after they've done making this wonderful, elaborate thing, they wipe it away. And again, it's an exercise in dissolution. Non-permanence. Any other questions on any of that? I'd like to go ahead.
Oh, I'm just thinking here, if when we think about like what is art, is it form plus meaning or form plus emotion, and how do we relate it to spiritual care? That if we were to simplify it like into a sentence, like what is arts-based spiritual care in terms of concept or form or whatnot?
I guess if I would try to dice it down into, very simple statements, I'd say, the breadth of human experience really is manifested through all the five senses. And sometimes what we hang on to or can attach to in terms of meaning is best experienced or more easily accessed or experienced by engaging multiple sensory experiences. Does anyone else have something to add that they would say about that?
Yeah, I might say that the arts are related to spiritual care in the sense that our souls really want to express themselves, and talking is only one way we can express ourselves. And so we as a people have found different ways to express ourselves. And so it's kind of soul based, is how I think about it.
Yeah.
We are at an hour, just to be aware of time. If there's anything you have that as you want to close out.
Okay. How late do we go?
I think that we are scheduled for right now, but
Right
I
now?
think that
Okay.
there are plenty of people that wouldn't mind staying a little bit as well. So I
Okay.
think I, on
I
the one hand, want to give people permission to leave if they choose,
okay.
or continue and stay if you have the time.
Okay.
What I will say, real quick, in case people do want to leave, is that we will have the recording up tomorrow. We'll try to put some resources with the recording. There is the option for CEUs. If you're a premium member, you can get them included. If you are a non-member, $5 for the CEU. And that just kind of covers our cost with the accreditor. So yeah, if you want to continue,
Okay.
we can have another half an hour or so.
Well,
for
I can keep it brief. We only have one section we haven't really talked about too much here, and I'll just do it briefly, which is the kind of the addiction area. I mean, certainly there are different things you can do with, the peer support and things like that. I think a lot of that's pretty self-explanatory, but with the addiction recovery, I just wanted to cover a couple things there, particularly when it comes to the down below section where it says habit replacive media. And I just wanted to talk about that just for a minute. Some of that is, could be described as more of an art therapy thing. Habit replacive therapy is the use of different art forms in helping to replace or substitute a substance abuse habit. And so it's been found that there are some art forms that are particularly conducive to this. Now, we are not therapists, but that doesn't mean that we can't capitalize on some of these different art mediums that actually help our patients who might be struggling with addiction to get their mind onto something else besides the chemical substance. And so I'll just kind of hit this quick, or why these particular art forms are helpful this way. We have fiber arts, which is a lot of needle arts there, relief printmaking, wheel thrown pottery, mosaic tile setting, and music making. And I'm not a music expert, so I won't expound upon that at the moment. But as far as those other ones, what they have in common and why they're helpful with working with addiction is a lot of these they strike the same part of the brain that engages anticipation response. And so oftentimes you will talk to addicts or people struggling with addiction. They'll say that, the thing that's really addictive is anticipating the drug. It's not so much the drug itself, it's the anticipation of it. And that's really the addictive part of what the chemical they're taking. They're anticipating that. Well, these particular art forms are known for this. And not only do they engage the anticipation response in the brain, they also use bipedal use of both hands. So in using both hands and having it linked into anticipation, it actually makes it where it can compete with a habit, like a drug habit or things like that. Two, there's a couple of these that have a huge dopamine payoff, particularly printmaking. I can tell you as a young person, I got addicted to printmaking when I first started college. And you're busy working on a plate for a long time, so that's building that anticipation, and you're working with both hands on it and all this. So you're fully engaged, and you're anticipating what this is going to be when it's done. But when you print it and you get a good print off that press and you pull it off, there it is like wow. It's a very addictive thing. And I can vouch for that. That's real. And that's one of those things where it certainly can be helpful when you're working in environments where people are struggling with addiction to give them something else to hang on to that can give them some enjoyment that has nothing to do with chemical or impairment on any level. And so I would, and I can also speak to on another note too, is when I was 13 years old, I had started smoking cigarettes, and I smoked cigarettes until I was 25 years old. And how I quit was crochet. And I was, and I told myself, I'd be crocheting away. And I told myself that if I could, go without a cigarette for a week, I could go and take the money I saved on cigarettes and go buy some of those fancy skeins of yarn that were multicolor and horribly, horribly expensive as kind of a payout. And by doing this, I got victory over it, and I've not had a cigarette in 25 years. Okay. So the ability of being able to harness the arts for being able to overcome addiction, that's a real thing, and I can vouch for that. And so, not that we're trying to be therapists here, but if their therapist tells us, go ahead and use that and do something fun, and maybe do a family tree, or make a gratitude plaque using woodcut to do it. And you might find that they end up getting attached to something that can bring them or wean them off of their chemical dependency that they're on. So I just wanted to mention that. Does anyone here work with addiction pretty closely in their practice?
I have over the years. My name's Karen. Hello. This is very
Hello.
interesting. Yeah, I work with Rick in the CPE program.
Okay.
I love what you're talking about in so many levels, and I love to be in contact with you because I'm into using objects in
Okay.
spiritual care, like doorknobs and clothespins and screwdrivers and things like that.
Oh,
And
awesome.
so I was just wondering, I'm working with a number of National Guardsmen, and one of the topics that keeps coming up in their case studies are young men who are addicted to porn.
Okay.
And I was wondering if that's if there's been any research or experiments with that population. I also used to work in a prison with many sex offenders, and work really closely with them in a curriculum around the houses of healing. And I just really was wondering if it was possible to do that with them, and what kinds of modalities would you choose to work with that population, particularly since it is their hands that are so much involved in the gratification during watching porn. And so should it be something that stimulates some other part of their body as a result, some kind of artistic thing that's a little different, that doesn't use the same muscle groups?
Yeah, I think, the nature of the addiction itself could be very case by case, but I'd say, yeah, hand mouth stuff. When it comes to hands, I think a lot of this, the wood cutting, I'd say even wood burning. You can get wood burners even. Some of those guys might really like that. But getting that, the two hands working on it for sure, with full mental engagement. And we got on here too, wheel thrown pottery. Wheel thrown pottery, there's a lot of sensory going on with that. I'd almost be inclined to try wheel pottery with some of those guys. Just getting them, because the wet clay, being able to kind of command it when you're throwing a pot on a potter's wheel, it isn't this delicate thing. It looks when you're seeing an experienced potter do it, it looks like it's like butter and it's easy as can be. And anyone here really done it? Okay, if you've really done it, you've got to lay into that clay and manhandle it. And I say that in a very literal way in this way. You got to manhandle that clay. You got to hold it firm, and then it starts to do that thing you see it do on the wheel. But it doesn't happen just by, that clay will boss you around if you don't firmly get engaged on that. So it is definitely a bipedal, heavy hands on, and then with it being wet and going through your fingers and muddy, it's a full sensory experience. So I would be inclined to try that with those guys. Two, sometimes when you're dealing with those addictions, to finding when this section over here that talks about vocational adaptive activity, getting some of these fellows building things might be helpful too. Like here I mentioned interior mural or full finish, but you could actually get into more heavier woodworking, things of that nature, building creative shelving, cabinetry, things like that. You'd have to make it probably a deal with a local wood shop to make that happen. But I'm thinking, getting some kind of muscle into it, getting them to handle something, might be part of that payoff as well, is what it would be my instinct, I guess. I don't know if that helps. So.
Kit, I happened to for some reason pull this mala out of a box today, and this mala is it was given to me by one of the caregivers of Ram Dass, one of the hospice caregivers of Ram Dass, who was with him when he died, and it has a little shirt here, or a little thread from his shirt here to hold the center bead in. And it made me, when you're talking about drugs, it made me think about Ram Dass, who is famously known as a Harvard psychologist who was part of the LSD experiments. And, he had these experiences, these drug-like experiences. And then he said, this can get me somewhere, but I can't stay there. And so he went off on his spiritual journey. He met Maharaji or Neem Karoli Baba, and he said, the spirituality gets me or keeps me in that place where drugs got me. This transcendent sort of feeling, and I think about the connection there of spirituality as a replacement for drug use, and I've heard you talk a little bit uh, about that. And then there's a comment here that I think also ties in because it might hit towards some of the bodily sensations people feel or experience in those states. But Claire Jones, she says, thank you for this. She said, I studied art for a few years and it reawakened my time in CPE at a psych hospital. I wonder how frequency and sound bath type option, wonder about frequency and sound bath type options. Some can evoke depths of emotions that need to surface or ground. And that is something that I've been to a lot of sound baths and they evoke some of those things. And yeah, I could see that. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I actually worked with some teens at a certain point that my way of actually getting through to them or connecting with them was them letting them rap to me. And there was a lot of power in that. Not just, them being able to express themselves, even though that's kind of huge. The music kind of takes them, the beat kind of takes them to a certain place. And like you say, it can be like a transcendent place or place where they feel empowerment. But also it was them being able to relate to me and that I was willing to listen. We sometimes think, oh, I can just, blow off this art form or, oh, this is just something that they're into, that kind of thing. But I think even us as ministers need to listen a little more deeply. They're trying to get, us to appreciate who they are and what this is, saying to them. And so, yeah, I think in those environments, music, particularly even, a lot of people, a lot of ministers are very inhibited by aggressive sounding music. And sometimes, I'm one of those people in my youth that, hung out with heavy metal people, and some of them were Christians. And we sometimes get this idea that, I can't have them listen to aggressive music. It's, it's evil. Really, sometimes that aggressive music is helping them deal with things that you wouldn't want them to deal with in another way. So it's letting that expression come out. And it could be like similar to like being on a racquetball court. I got to get my anger out some way. And I can beat on this ball. I can beat on a person or I can beat on a drum, but which one is it going to be? And I say, beat on that drum or something, or hit that ball. Don't hit people. And do you hear what I'm saying, Rick? I mean, is what I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, I just heard don't hit people, and I've taught that to little kids too. So yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, we can I don't know, you're in the
Oh, no.
community, so you can always people can message you, I assume.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Thank
we
you
can
so
keep
much,
in
all of
contact.
you, for taking the time to hear me today.
Yeah, it was
On
great.
this, thank you. On this leaflet, there is my Gmail there if you want to reach out. by all means. I'm going to be starting a kind of a devotional kind of around all of this stuff. That won't be going here till the beginning of June, but if you want to send me, if you send me an email, I can certainly add you to that. It goes right into your email box every couple weeks. I can certainly do that. We kind of do a reflection on, I'll be sharing basically arts-based activities for wellness. And so I'll be, having little sheets, and people can purchase sheets or just listen to the devotional, that kind of thing. So I welcome you if you're interested in that. Otherwise, yeah, you can, visit me through email or visit me through my Facebook page. I'm happy to talk with you guys anytime. I appreciate you
When we
listening today.
when we
I just,
post the recording and
I,
all of that, we'll put all that information in there.
Wonderful.
Karen, you had something you wanted to say?
yes, I always have to have the last word. I'm just from the East Coast. I'm an asshole. That's all I can say. But here's the thing. I plead to everybody that's on this call, that's been on this call, to lobby their municipalities for money to be funded so that these kinds of services can be in the mall. I've had chaplains in courtrooms here in Minnesota. I'm trying to create a bill to produce municipal chaplains for cities and towns so they can have, the municipality says we have a chaplain, and then all the departments figure out where do people need to be heard and seen and loved, and we put them there, whether it's a library or teachers after school. Middle school teachers after school could use some spiritual care, let me tell you. I've been an eighth
Yes.
grade teacher. So anyway, I just want us all to really consider the political and economic ramifications of this in order to make this happen and really move it beyond a small group of people. We have to get support from the government. So anyway, enough of my
Yes.
pontificating.
you.
But
I have a like-minded person that I talked to today on the phone that it lives down the street from me, Karen. So I'm going to connect you to. But I want to end here with a comment here that was put that got 6 hearts in the comment, because I think it goes back to like, what is this question of art and spiritual care? Suzanne Bird, she says, I think also art, for those who are coping through their faith, allows us to enter into a sacred space and connect with creation, as spirituality is also defined in how we connect to self and others. I find both visual arts and music to create a wonderful path to connection. So,
Beautifully
amen.
stated.
yeah.
Amen.
Thank you
It's
all
our
for coming,
wordsmith.
and we will follow up in the community. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Thank you.
Great.
Have a blessed night, you guys.
You too.